All right, this is a big week for us. Giant just dropped the new Trance X.
Look, I don't want it to be talking all that good, so I just hit you with the plays. Running up the score like Tyreek, I'm going deep. Watch me how I'm saucing, I be spreading it with ease. You gon' see the P's, you gon' see the...
This is a bit of a new look for Giant in 2024. This bike is a big departure from the previous Trance X. It now gets shifted up a little bit more towards the descending side of the spectrum than the previous one. Still a very balanced, fun, neutral, zippy little trail bike. Just gets some more descending chops than it used to have, which I think is a really good thing. So stick around to see what it's all about. Chat about a couple of features before we go ride. The new Trance X has 5mm more rear wheel travel, meaning it's 140 now. Still has a 150 fork, except there is now an SX version, which gets 145 rear, 160 front, gets scooched up to scale just a little bit more. The SX only comes in a mullet or mixed wheel setup, can't be run as a 29. The regular one can do both. It only comes as a 29, but you could convert it to a mullet if that's what you're into. This does have Giant's 3-position flip chip, and interestingly, which we're seeing pop up more and more, we've got adjustable reach headset cups, so you can go plus or minus 5mm from a neutral setting. So now let's get into it. I found the previous Trance X to be one of the best technical climbers I have ever ridden, and for its category, it was one of the better overall climbers as well. The new Trance X does give up a little bit of that efficiency. It still retains the really good handling and the incredible traction on the climbs. It just gives up a tiny bit of efficiency in favor of potentially even more traction, more control, and comfort on the climbs. It is still very much at the top of its class for the category though, especially in technical terrain. The new Trance X's suspension platform does feel quite a bit more active. You'll notice a little bit less pizzazz when you're on the pedals. That said, for the category, it is still one of the more efficient climbers. The benefits of the new suspension kinematics were probably mostly intended for downhill gains, but I do think you get some uphill benefits in terms of more traction, more comfort, and more control. The climbing position on the Trance is still very neutral. The old one was a bit on the sporty, climby, pedally side. Now it's getting a bit more relaxed and a little bit more neutral, but it hasn't gone so far towards the descents that it's now a bad climber. It's interesting to think about all of the different fit and feel possibilities with these adjustable reach headset cups. For instance, I felt just a little bit stretched out in that seated position on my XL with the stem that comes on the bike. So I would maybe drop that stem by 10mm, but add back 5mm of reach to get a net effect of a shorter seated position, but maybe a longer wheelbase and a little bit more stability, because I tend to prefer descending. Either way, these combinations are pretty endless and pretty fun to think about. You have a lot more control over not only fit and feel, but also ride quality on the bike. All right, jumping into the downhill, the Trance X now separates itself quite a bit more from the Trance 29 and even the Anthem. The old one sat pretty close to those bikes actually. So this one shifts a little bit more towards the descent side of the scale. I'd still say it's a really balanced ride quality. It hasn't gone full gravity. I really like where this bike sits though in terms of DH performance. As a guy who typically rides longer travel bikes, I like my trail bikes to still provide some of that confidence and comfort that I'm used to on the downhill. And the Trance does just that while still maintaining a quick and zippy and lively handling that you'd expect out of a trail bike. I think this one would be completely happy doing laps in the bike park, hitting jumps on your favorite flow trail, or just a quick rip in some chunky technical terrain. It is a very versatile little platform. So let's talk about how it gets better on the downhill, and we'll start with suspension. Giant has revised the leverage curve quite a bit here. It's a little softer off the top than the previous version. It still has quite a bit of progression, but the rate of progression is a little more linear, meaning it doesn't drop off quickly or sharply at one given point. It's progressive, but linearly progressive, meaning it's predictable and it will feel pretty consistent top to bottom, while still giving you the ramp up you need to avoid nasty bottom outs all the time. And what that equates to out on the trail, for me mostly, is more traction, better small bump compliance. The Trance X is a lot easier now to trust in those bad, loose, and flat corners or under hard braking. It just sticks to the ground a little bit better. In fact, I found myself pumping corners where I'm typically a little bit nervous and I kind of tiptoe and ice skate my way through them. On this one, I didn't really care. I just kind of pumped through it and the bike had my back. So you pair that traction with the bike's agile geometry and you've got a really good cornerer. The geometry on the Trance loosens up quite a bit. The head tube angle is now significantly slacker, with the high on the new one being slacker than the low on the old one. It's about a degree slacker overall across all 3 positions. And that is an appreciated change for me. It makes the bike more comfortable at speed and better in steep and rough terrain. In the Trance X's case, I don't think the handling got any worse for it. Previously, the bike did get a little bit sketchy in really steep and nasty terrain, and now I think it feels right at home. The handling was calmed down just a little bit with this most recent version, and I do think the bike overall benefits because of it. So now let's talk about a couple of comparisons. And we've been talking about this one the whole time, but the new Trance X versus the old Trance X. The new Trance X is quite a bit different than the previous version. I felt like the previous version was more about the climbs than it was about the descents, and this new one gets shifted a lot closer to neutral, or maybe even just slightly descent focused, which personally is a good thing. It's a 140 mil travel bike. If you are into the climbs, Giant has a Trance 29, and if you're really into the climbs, they have an Anthem. The newest Trance X is quite a bit more comfortable, more forgiving, and provides more traction. It does pay a small climbing penalty in terms of flat out efficiency, but I still think it's near the top or at the top of its class in overall climbing performance. Now let's talk about the Rocky Mountain Instinct. These bikes both got descending upgrades, although the Rocky went maybe a little bit further than the Trance. Both of these bikes look fairly similar on paper, similar travel, intended uses, but the biggest difference is going to be in the head tube angle. The Rocky Instinct is quite a bit slacker than the Trance X, and that reveals the bike's true intentions. It is more descent focused. It doesn't climb as well as the Trance X, and it's a little bit less balanced. That said, it's quite a bit more capable and comfortable and confident on the downhill. But again, Trance X climbs better and is a bit more balanced with sharper, snappier handling. Now the Yeti SB140. The SB140 tackles the same type of terrain as the Trance X, but it goes about it in a bit of a different way. It is a bit more racy and sporty with a stiffer and firmer feeling suspension platform and frame. At the end of the day, if I was interested in going fast, I'd take the SB140. If I just wanted to cover ground, keep average speeds very high, I'd go SB140. If I wanted to just go out, ride my bike, have fun, goof around, I'd take the Trance X because it facilitates that just a little bit better. So who is the Trance X for? With a bike like this, it's tough to not just say everybody, because it's good enough on the climbs, it's good enough on the descents that nobody's getting too offended. It does skew a little bit less towards the climbs than the previous version, which I think opens up some rougher terrain for riders who are interested in that. Previous edition would get a little gun shy in double black diamond terrain, but this new one I think handles it just fine, feels right at home, especially in the right hands. So with all that said, if you care about the climbs, but you also care about the descents, you'll likely be very happy aboard the Trance X. I also think it works very well as a little bike for big bike people. I typically like big, long travel bikes, so when I go for a little bike, I'm going because I want the upgrade in the handling, I want the quicker, snappier, more lively, and fun feel, but I still want a little bit of that comfort. I still want a bit of confidence and control, because that's what I'm used to in my big bike. So this is a good little bike for big bike people. That's gonna do it. We'll see you next time.